Hey guys, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video we're gonna see how we can create a simple cryptocurrency dashboard using the React.js, and let's see how it looks like. So here you see that at the dashboard we have a search bar. There we can search for a cryptocurrency, and you see we got some suggestions. We can select one, and then we are here at the chart. We can see the history of the Ethereum. Then we can click on this intervals, so we can see the history for 1 day, for 1 week, for 1 month, or 1 year. We also have a top assets here. Here the first one are the top assets will be shown, and we have the exchanges here. So in this page you see we have a table. There all exchanges are shown. Then we have the pagination. There we can and by clicking on them we can go to the different page and see all the exchanges. So this will be the application that we're gonna create, and for this application we're gonna use this API, which is actually a completely free API, so you can just start using it without needing to registration or any API key. And by that said, so now let's get started. Alright, so the first thing that we have to do is to create a React app. For that you can open the terminal and type npx create React app and dot. So this will take a bit time, so I'm gonna pause the video here and we'll be back when it is done. Okay, so now it is completed, and the next step will be to removing some extra files that is created by React. So we can remove them, and the first one will be this app.css file, and then app.test, index.css, the logo, the report web vitals, and setup tests. So we can remove all of them. Then you can go to the app.js file and remove these imports, and you can also remove everything inside this div tag. Then inside this index.js file you can also remove this import index.css, and also import report web vitals. You can also remove these lines, and you can get rid of this React strict mode as well. Alright, so that's it. We also need to install some packages that we will use in this app. So first I'm gonna clear the terminal. So I'm gonna paste it here. So these are the packages that we will install. So we will install React Paginate, Sass, and React Chart.js to create those charts. And we will install the React Router DOM 6. So this is the latest version. So then we just need to hit enter. So these will be installed. So I just forgot to check if this app is running without any error. So to check it, first I'm gonna open a new terminal. I'm gonna also zoom in so you can see it better. So here I'm gonna put a h3 tag and put some text inside it. Then I'm gonna run the app, and let's see if we are getting any error. So as you can see, we didn't get any error, and we got the crypto here. Okay, so that means the app is working without any problem. So now what I think we can do, we can start by creating these two pages, one for dashboard and one for exchanges. Then we can also add their a route for each of those pages. So for that, we can create a new folder inside this source folder and name it pages. And inside it, we can create two components. One will be dashboard.js and another one will be exchanges.js. So each page will be a component. We can go to the dashboard file, and here we can create a component and name it dashboard. So right now we will just return a h3 tag. So I'm gonna just put a dashboard as text inside this h3 tag, so we know that we are in a dashboard page. We can copy this codes and paste it in exchanges.js and then change the dashboard to exchanges. So I'm gonna change it here and here as well. Okay, so now let's add the routing. So for the routing, we can use the React router. So I'm gonna import routes and a route from React router DOM. To add the routes, we can use this routes component that we've imported. So I'm gonna put this inside this div tag. Then inside this routes component, we can put our route. So we want a route for dashboard, which will be like the home page. So therefore, for the path, I'm gonna put dash. And here I just misspelled, so it would be route. So, and then we have to pass the element, and the element will be the component that we want to be rendered when we are in this path. So the component will be dashboard, but first we need to import it. Like that. So I'm gonna now put this dashboard as element for this route. Then I'm gonna copy this route and make a route for exchanges here. So the path for exchanges will be exchanges. The element will be, so I can also import the exchanges. And the element will be exchanges. To make this routing working, we have one more step to do, and that's it. That would be here inside this index.js file. So here we need to import browser router from React router DOM. Then we have to wrap it around this app component. So now this should work. So we can open the browser again. So as you can see, by default, this is we are in a dashboard. And if I go to the exchanges, so we are in an exchanges page. Now let's add this sidebar. For the sidebar, we need to create a new component and we will put the sidebar inside it. For the components, I'm gonna add a new folder here inside the source folder and name it components. So we can add our components inside this folder. Here we will have a sidebar component. So I'm gonna name the component sidebar. Here we also need to import link from React Router DOM. So you see here in the demo we have two links in this navbar, one for exchanges and one for dashboard. So we will use this link to create them. This sidebar will return a side tag, and we will also add a class name sidebar. We will use these class names later for styling. Inside this side we will have a div tag with a class name logo, and for the logo we simply just add a h2 tag with a text logo. After this div tag we can have a link to root path, which will be dashboard. We can have another one for exchanges, and we also change the text to exchanges. So in a demo you also see that we have one icon for dashboard and one icon for exchanges. For icon I'm gonna use the font awesome icons, and I already have it here, so I can just copy the icon for the dashboard and put it here, and I'm gonna also copy the icon for the exchanges and put it here, like that. Now to make this sidebar work, we can go to the app.js and we have to add this sidebar to our app. So you see that this sidebar is actually same in all pages. So therefore we can add it before this route tag. But before that we need to import it. So we import sidebar from components and then sidebar. And then we simply just add it here before routes. And now here you see that we have a sidebar here, but it doesn't look like a sidebar yet because we have to add the styling to it. So here is the first styling that we want to add to this app. For the styling, I'm gonna add another folder in this source folder, name it style, and we will use Sass for styling, so I'm gonna put our Sass file inside this folder. So right now we will create 3 files. The first one will be styles.sass. The second one will be underscore sidebar, and the last one will be underscore config. So for each component I'm gonna use this Sass module to create a style for just that component. So for example here I've created a file for just the sidebar styling. We also have a config file where it's not too much we will put here, but it's more like things that are common, styles that are common between each component, so we will put inside this config. We have also a styles.sass. This file is actually the root file, so we will put all the styles inside this. So we will import these modules like sidebar and other styles for other components, and we will import that here inside this file. We will also add some other styles that are common between those components inside it. Then the only file that we have to import is this style.sas. So this is the only file that will be imported, and we will import it inside this app.js, and that will do everything that we need for styling. Now I'm gonna just copy some codes, style codes, and paste them here. So I'm gonna just copy and paste for a style part because it will take time. So, and this video will be much longer if I do so. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just copy and paste them and explain them. It will be faster, and I think it will be enough to understand these codes. Okay, so here at the top, this star means that we will add some styles to all elements. We will set the padding to 0, margin to 0. We change the box sizing here, and we will have we will change the font family here. And this font family is not included in a SAS or CSS, so we have to import it from Google Fonts. We will do it in a minute. So, and here we are in HTML, we are changing just the scroll behavior, and here we are changing the background color to base color, and this base color actually will be imported from config, so we will add it as well. So first let's add this base color to config. So I'm gonna just paste it. So we have a base color and secondary color. Then to access it here inside this styles, we have to import this config file, and we can do it by typing @import and then config, and like that. Okay, so now let's also add this font. To do it, you can go to the fonts.google.com, and here you can just search for this font name. Then we will add some of them. So we will I already did here, I have it. So you see that I added light 300, regular 400, and some other. Then when you added those that you want, you can copy this link and you can go to the public folder and index.html, and you can put it somewhere in the head. I'm gonna put it below this link and save it. Okay, so now let's also add the styling for sidebar. For that, I'm gonna also copy the code and paste it here. So here at the top, we are importing config file because we are using base color and secondary color, and they are inside this config file. Then we are adding some styles to sidebar, and it is sidebar class, and it is this side tag that has a class name sidebar. So we are selecting it, we are changing the min height and min width for it, we are changing the default width, we are changing the background color, and we are changing it to the same background color as the body tag. We are giving it a border right, and this is this line that are at the right of the sidebar. Here we are giving some styles to the logo, so it's not that important, therefore I'm gonna just skip this one. Here we are adding some styles to all A tags that are inside this sidebar class. And these A tags are actually same as these links, because when this app is converted to HTML code, these links will be a tags. So here we are giving them some styles. Then this if a solid is these logos or these icons, sorry. So here we are adding some space between the icons and the text. But right now, if we go to our page, you see there is no styles, and it is because we first need to import our sidebar. So we need to import it inside this styles.sas file, and then and we are importing it here because this will be the only file that we want to import in app.js. So therefore this file should contain all the styles for all components. So here we can import sidebar, and by importing it we are actually including all the codes of the sidebar inside this styles.sas. Then we can go to the app.js and import style and styles.sas. And now if we go to our page, you see that the styles are added. But there are two or maybe three problems right now here. First, the icons are missing, and it is because I forgot to include the font awesomes in our project. The second one is the pages. The pages should be displayed at the right of the sidebar, but right now it is at the bottom. And the third one is when I click on these exchanges, you see that we are redirected to empty page, and it is, so we can start by fixing this one. So it is because if we go to the sidebar.js, it is because I misspelled this exchanges here, so we can fix it. And now if we click on it, you see we got to the right page. Now let's add the icons. For the icons, we can go to the cdn.js. Here we can search for font awesome, and then we can copy the link tag, and we can go to the index.html and paste it after the Google font. And then now we have the icons. Now let's fix the position of the pages. For that, you see that in a app.js, we are returning a tag that has a class name app. So this is the parent of pages and sidebar. So we will add some styles for this div tag. So I'm gonna just copy the styles for it and paste it here like that. So now if we go back to our page, you see that we got what we expected. So but by that the sidebar is completed. Now let's create the dashboard page. Before we create our pages, we need to add a store for our app. There we can store some states and add some actions that will fetch data from API and update some states. And for this project, we're gonna use the React context for creating the store, but you can use any other state management if you want. But I'm gonna use the React context because it is easier to use, and I don't want to make this project more complex. So for a store, we can add a new folder inside the source folder and name it store. Then we can add a new file inside it and name it selected currency context. Then we can add another file and name it store.js. For a specific fetching data and sending requests to API, we can add another file inside this source folder and name it API. So as I said, we're gonna use this file, or we're gonna add a class in this file, and we're gonna use that class to send and retrieve data from API. I can actually copy the code for this file because it is quite simple. So let me explain it. So here we are importing the Axios, which is a library that we will use for sending and retrieving data from API. Then we have a base URL here. It will be actually the base URL for our API. Then we have here the API class, and inside it we have a static get, and this is static get make this get method so that we can use this method without needing to create an object of this API class. This get method will send a get request to our API, and URL that it will send the request to it will be base URL plus this path that we are passing to this method. Then it will return the response, or it will return the promise, and we can wait for this response, and then we can get our data. And here we are just exporting it. And that's it. So as you saw, it is actually a very simple class here, but it makes our codes or our code structure in this project cleaner. So if in the future, if you want to add any other requests like post requests or some logins, you can actually store them all inside this class. And now let's go back to the selected currency context file. Here we're gonna import the user state and create context from React. We're gonna also import the API class that we've created. Then let's create some constants. The first one will be default interval, which will be 1D. So this stands for 1 day. The second one will be intervals. It will be an object, and the keys in this object will be 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, and 1 year. And it will be actually same as the text for these buttons. The values will be the count of the days. So for 1 day, it will be 1. For 1 week, it will be 7 days, and so on. Now let's create a context. I'm gonna call it selected currency context. And we can create a context using this create context hook that we've imported, and we can pass an empty object to it. Now let's create a provider for this context. We can type export const, and then we can name it selected currency provider like that. And this will be actually a component. Here we will create some states. The first one will be history. Set history, and it will be an empty array by default. The second one will be selected interval and set interval. By default, it will be same as this default interval. The last one will be ID and set ID, and it will be null by default. So this history state will be same as so when we want to patch the history for a currency, we will get a data like this. So the history will be same as this data, and each item in this data will be actually one of these points in this graph. So the selected interval will be one of these buttons, so, or one of these that we are selecting. So 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and so on. The ID will be the ID of the currency that we've selected. Now let's create the values. Actually, I can copy it and paste it here. So this will be the values that other components can access it. We have this get currency history that we didn't create yet, but we're going to create it in a second. Then this component, the selected currency provider, will return selected currency context.provider, and between these two we can type props.children. So this provider has a props that it needs, and it is the value. The value will be same as these values. So we are providing these values to the components that this this selected currency provider will wrap around it. Now let's create this function, get currency history. This function takes two arguments. The first one is the ID, which will be the currency's ID, and the second one will be interval. And by default, it will be same as the selected interval. So what does this function do? This function will send a request to the API and get the history for the currency with this ID. For that, we're going to use this endpoint. And in this endpoint, we have to specify the ID, interval, and this start and the end, which is optional, but we are going to specify these as well. So the ID will be the currency's ID. The interval will be one of these values, but we're gonna just use h2 and d1. So for example, if we want to get the prices for the last 24 hours, we're gonna use this h2, and that means that we will get a price for each 2 hours in the last 24 hours. But if we want the prices for the 7 days or 1 month or and so on, so we're gonna use this d1, and that means that we're gonna get just one price for each days. And this start and the end means that from which date to which date we want the history. We can start by creating a variable and call it interval underscore. So it is not the same as this one. And here we're gonna check if interval is equal default interval, which is 1 day. And if it is, then we want to return h2. Otherwise, we want to return d1. Then for the start date, first we create a variable and set it to new date. Then we can type start.setDate. We can set the start date, and we can set it to start.getDate, which will be same as current date minus intervals and then interval. So for example, if the selected interval is 1 week, so this will be 7. So it will be current date minus 7 days. So the start date will be 7 days ago. Then for the end date, we can just type new date, which will be same as the current date. Then to get the URL, actually I can copy and paste this one. It is a bit long. So this assets and the history, you can see here we have assets and history, but this Bitcoin that stands here will be this ID. So this ID will not be same always. So we have the currency ID here. Then we have to specify the interval, which will be same as this interval that we've specified here. Then we have the start and end dates. But as you can see, I've called a method from start and end dates, which is get time, and this get time will convert these dates to the milliseconds, because as you can see, this endpoint for the start and the end want the dates as the milliseconds. Okay, so now we have the URL. We can send a request to the API, and for that first we need to convert this function to async await function here. Then we can await for the API dot get. Then we can just pass the URL to it. Now we have the response. We can set the history. Set the history to the response dot data and then dot data. So this last data will be this data that we have here. Then we can set the ID to the ID, and we can set the interval to the interval. And that's it. But right now the components or our app doesn't access these values. To make it work, we can go to this store file. Here first we can import the selected currency provider. Then we can create a function and call it store. It will be a component, and here we will return the selected currency, and then between them we can set the props.children. And by doing this we can wrap this component around the other components. We also need to export this store, and then we can go to this index.js file, and here we can import the store from store and then store. And there's a small. So now we have the store. We can wrap this around our app. So here we can call this store. Then can put it between the store. And that's it. Now other components can access the values. But right now, as you can see, we got an error, and it says that it can't resolve the Axios. So it's because I forgot to install the Axios, and we can install it by typing npm install Axios, and it will solve the problem. So now, as you can see, it is running correctly. All right, now let's create another store. There we will store a list of the all available currencies and also a list of the exchanges. So for that, we can create a new file inside the store folder. We can name it currency list context. Here we can import the use a state hook and create context hook from React. Then we can import the API class that we've created. And now let's create a context, and we can name it the currency list context. Create context. We also need to export this currency list context. And now let's create a provider for this context. So we can name it currency list provider. Here we can start by creating two states. The first one will be for currency list, and by default it will be an empty array. The second one will be exchanges, and it will be also empty array by default. We need values for this context. The values will be currency list, which will be same as this state. Second one will be exchanges, which also will be same as the exchanges. Then we have the set currency list. This set currency list will be actually get currency list. We will create this function a bit later, but this function will fetch the currencies from the API, and we will store it to this state. Another action that we need to add here will be set exchanges, and this one will be get exchanges. All right, before we create this these two functions, we can return the currency list context dot provider. The value will be values. We also need to pass the props dot children between this provider. And then now let's create those two functions. I'm going to just fix the indentation for this so it looks better. So now let's create those two functions. Get currency list and get exchanges. Okay, so we can start by this get currency list. Here we can type api.get. So we'll send a get request to the API, and the path for this will be assets, and you can actually find this path here in an asset. So if you click here, you will see for getting assets, we have this path. Then if we got a response, so we can set the currency list to the response.data.data. But if we got some error, so we can catch the error here. So if we got error, then we want to set the currency list to empty array. Then we can console.log, so we can see the error. We can actually copy this one, these lines, and paste it inside this exchanges. So now the only differences will be the path, and the path for exchanges will be here. So if you click on exchanges, you will come here, and here we have the exchanges, and for the exchanges we have this path. So we can change it here. Then when we got the response, we want to set the exchanges and not the currency list. And we can, it will be same for the catch error. And that's it. So this will be our provider. Now let's add it in this store file. So we can import the, it was the currency list provider. Then we can wrap it around these other providers. We can type currency list provider. We can move this between this one. And that's it. Now, and by doing that, our app now has the access for those states. We are almost ready to create the dashboard and exchange pages. But before that, I want to say that here inside the selected currency context, I forgot to export the selected currency context, and we need to do it. So at the bottom, we can type export default selected currency context. And there is one more step to do before we create those two pages, and it is here inside the app.js. We need to fetch data before we are opening one of those pages. So for that, first we can import use effect and use context from React. We also need to import the selected currency context and import the currency list context. Now, to access the values from this context, we can use this use context hook. So we can type const and selected currency ctx, which will be context, and then use context. Then we need to pass the context that we want the value from it. and in this case will be selected currency context. We can copy it and do the same for the currency list context. We can change the name here first. Currency list. Then we change the context here. Now we are going to use this use effect to run some side effects. So we can type use effect. And for dependency, it will be an empty array because we want to run this function just once, and it will be the first time this app is running. So here we want to first get the currency list, Okay, so I'm gonna just check if I've wrote it correctly. Yes, I did. And actually we can change this set to get. It makes more sense. And then we can go back to the app.js. Here we want to also get the exchanges. Thereafter we can use the select currency context, and we want to set the history, and by default we want to get the history for the Bitcoin. We can actually change this one to get as well, and we can go to this context. We can change it here. It was this set history, and we can change it to get. So this you can see this get currency history. This ID was the Bitcoin that we've passed it. And this one should also be a get. I forgot to change it. So now let's create the dashboard page. For that you can open this dashboard.js. Here first I'm gonna import the use state and use context from React. Then I'm gonna import the selected currency context, and I'm gonna also import the intervals from this selected currency context. So if you open this selected currency context file again, you see we have these intervals. So to be able to import it, first we need to export it. So I'm gonna just export it, and then inside the dashboard I'm gonna import the intervals. So I'm gonna also import the currency list context. Then I'm gonna create some constants here before this dashboard component. So I've just copy and pasted it. So we're gonna use this these options to format the dates that are shown at the bottom of this chart. So you see when I'm changing the interval, the format of these date times are changing. So we're gonna use this these three to correct these date times. So now inside this dashboard component, first I'm gonna create a variable, call it ctx for context, and then use context. Then it will be the selected currency context. So by this syntax we can access this context. We can do the same for the currency list. We can name it the currencies and use context, and here it will be currency list context. Okay, then and actually from this currency list, if I open it again, we need for the dashboard we need just this currency list. So what we can do is to type dot currency list. So now these currencies are actually just this currency list. I'm gonna also create a state for search phrase and set search, and it will be user state, and by default it will be empty string. Then I'm gonna also create a state for the suggestions. The suggestions are used for this search box. You see, when I'm typing some words, you see that we got some suggestions. So we're gonna store those suggestions inside this state. So we can call it suggestions, then set suggestions. By default, it will be empty array. So now this component will return a main tag with a class name main. Then it will have 3 sections. So you see here in this page, we have one section for the search bar, one section for this chart, and the last section will be for the top assets. We can start by the search box. So we can add a div tag inside this first section. You can give it a class name Searchbox. Then inside it, I'm gonna add a input. The type will be text. The placeholder will be search with the 3 dots. The value will be search phrase, and on a change, we will set it to a function called on a search change. So now let's create this on a search change. The first thing that we're gonna do inside this function is to set the search to the event target value. Then we're gonna go through each currency inside this currency list and check if their name includes this search phrase. So for that, I'm gonna create a variable called matched. Then we can type currencies. Then we can use the filter method to filter the currencies. So we're gonna go through each currency. Then we're gonna check if currency dot name to lowercase. Then we're gonna check if it includes event target value to lowercase. So by doing it, we are filtering the currencies that are matched. Then we're gonna check if matched length is greater than 0, or sorry, greater than 5, because we want to just show the first 5 the matched currencies. So if I open this page again, you see each time I'm typing, so you see that we are getting just the first one. So here we're gonna check if it is the lengths of the matched currencies are greater than 5. If it is, and we can also check if event target value is not equal to empty string. If it is true, then we want to set the matched, then a slice. So we just select the first one, and it should be a let. So you see that we are changing the matched here, so that means it can be a constant. And if you are wondering why I'm checking for event target value is not empty string, is because if it is empty string, so the matched currencies will be all the currencies on this currency list, which so in that case we don't want any suggestion. We can also check if event target value is equal empty strings, and if it is, then we want to set the match to empty array. Okay, after this if sets, we can set the suggestions to the matched currencies. So now let's show the currencies, show the matched currencies. For that, we can after this input, we can check, we can add a curly brackets here, and we can check if suggestions length is greater than 0, and if it is, then we want to show a list, and inside this list we want to go through suggestions. So we can use the map function here and go through each currency, and for each currency we will return a list item. So the key of this list item will be currency ID, and we can also add an on a click event to it. Here we can call a function set or we can call it selected search it currency, and we can pass the currency .id as argument to it. So, and between this or inside this list item, we want to show the currency .name, and that's it. Now let's create this selected search currency. So we can create it after this on a search change. So it will take argument. We can name it currency ID. Then here we want to set the history, or it should be actually get history. We want to get the history of the currency ID. So you see that we've created this get history inside this selected currency context. So this is this function that we are calling. So as you can see, we are getting a ID. So this ID is the currency ID. Then it will fetch the history for the selected currency. Then we want to set the search to empty string, and we want to set the suggestions to empty array. Now let's start with the second section, which will be actually this part, so the buttons and the graph, and we can start by creating the buttons. So in a second section, we will add a div tag, then we give it a class name, intervals, then we're gonna go through the keys of the intervals. In this interval, you see the keys will be 1 day, 1 week, and so on. So we're gonna go through them, and for each, so we're gonna use the map function here, and for each interval, we want to return a button with the text interval. This button will have a class name. So the class name, we can use the string template here. So the first class name will be interval button, and then we're gonna check if the interval is equal to the ctx dot interval. So if the interval is equal to the selected one, then we want to add the class name active as well. So if the interval is the selected one, so it will be the active. Otherwise, we will just have this interval button as class name. Then for the on a click event, we want to get the history, and we will pass the ctx selected ID and then interval. So as we saw before, this get history will get the history for this currency with this interval. We also need to give a key to this button, and the key will be interval. And that's it. So this will be our buttons, and after this div tag, we're gonna add our this line graph. So let's add it. For the line graph, we need to create another component, and for that we're gonna use a library called React Chart 2, as I said in the beginning. And then you can see how you can create. And if we go to the home page, so I can show you how you can find it. So you can click on the components, then you can click on a line here, then you can click on a see full usage examples, and then line chart. So and here you will get a complete example of how you can use this line chart. So first, let's create a new component here inside the components folder, and we can name it line chart. So I'm gonna create an empty component here. Now we can go back to this page again, and then we're gonna copy this chart.js register and the imports. So we can copy it, then we can paste it at the top of our component, and then we can remove this faker. We don't need it. Then inside the component, we're gonna return a div tag with a class name line chart. And we also need to pass 3 props to this component. So the first one will be data, second one will be labels, and the last one will be selected currency. So inside this div tag, we're gonna have another div tag with a class name title, and inside it we will have a h3 tag, and inside the h3 tag we will have selected currency dot name. So we will have another div tag here, another h3 tag, and in this one we will show the price, and for the price we're gonna type math round, then selected currency price USD multiply by 100, then we're gonna divide the result by 100. So this part will just round the currency's price to the 2 decimal number. So you see in this demo we will have the name and we will have the price here. So these are those 2 h3 tags. Then after that we will, after this title, we will have the line. So this line, you see that we've imported it from React Chart.js 2. So this will be our chart. This component takes 2 arguments, or at least 2 arguments. Those will be options. So for the options, actually you see here in their example, they have an option here. They pass this one as options to line chart, but I've created my own, so I'm going to just copy it and paste it here before the component. And let me explain it as well. So this option says that the chart can be responsive, and we set the legend's display to false, and this legend will be these 2 boxes. So by setting it to false, those will disappear from our chart. Then for scales, you see that I've changed the text color and font size for the y-axis and the x-axis. So I did the same for x-axis. And this text color and fonts will be this text at the left and at the bottom. You see the bottoms will be the date. So this color and font size will be for those texts. Then I've also set the grids display false for the y and x axis, and it is, so in their example you see that they have a grid here in their chart, but by setting it to the false, you see they will not be shown here in our chart. So now let's just pass this as options to this line chart. Then we will have the data. For the data, we'll create here another, inside the component we create another variable and call it the chart data. It will be an object. We will have the labels. The labels will be the labels that we passed as props. Then the data set. Data sets will be an array. So here the first one, and actually we will just have one data set. So here we will have the label. The label will be selected currency name. Then the data will be the data, and the border color will be RGB. Then 161, 63, and 128. So let me explain these data sets as well. So in their example, you see that they have, for the data, they have two data sets. So each of these lines will be one data set. And you see also the border color that we've passed will be the color of the line, and the label, when we hover over a point, you see we are getting the name of the data set. So it is what the label does. Okay, so now let's pass this chart data as data to the line chart, and by that our line chart will be completed. Now let's use it in a dashboard. We can add the line chart after this intervals. So here we can type line chart, and if I click on it, it will import it as well. So the line chart wanted the data. The data will be CTX history map, and for each we can type, yeah, for each item we want item dot price USD. So the data will be actually an array of the prices. Then the labels. For the labels, I'm gonna call a function generate labels. We're gonna create it in a second, but before that we can set the selected currency. Selected currency will be currencies. Then we're gonna use the find method to find the currency. Currency with ID, their ID is equal to the CTX selected ID. So now let's create this generate labels. Okay, we can create it here. In the generate labels, first we're gonna create a variable called options. We're gonna use this options to format these dates at the bottom. So each time the interval is changing, you see that the format of these are changing as well. So for example, for one day it is hour and minute, but for week and month it is a month name and the days number, and for 6 months and 1 year, you see that it is month, the day, and the year. So here it is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna format these dates. So here the options will be, we're gonna check if CTX interval is equal to 1 day. And if it is 1 day, then we want to set the options to options hour minute. Otherwise, we want to set it to options month day. Then we're gonna change it one more time if 6 month or 1 year. So we're gonna check if the CTX interval is 6 months or 1 year, and if it is, then we want to change these options again. In this time it will be options month year. So here at the top you see that month year will be year, months, and day. Otherwise we want to use just the previous options. So if it is not 6 months and 1 year, we're gonna use the options that were selected here. Then we're gonna return, so this function generate labels will return CTX history, then map. For each item we want to create a date. So new date, the date will be item.date. So the date is a string here. We are just converting it to date object. Then we're gonna return, so for each item in this history we're gonna return date to local string. So we're gonna format it here English US, and the options, how we are formatting it, will be the options that we've got here. And that's it. So this will generate our labels, and the labels will be an array as well. So, and I think if we'll look at our example, it looks like we got some error here. Undefined name, line chart 66. Okay, so we got an error here at line 66 here. The name selected code. Okay, something that we forgot. If here, if there is no, we're gonna first check if there isn't any selected currency. If there is not any selected currency, we want to return null, and I think it will fix this error. Yeah, it did. So okay, so now you see that it doesn't look like how it's supposed to, but it is because we didn't add the styling part. But we're gonna do it after we added the last section, which will be this top assets. But if you're wondering how I knew that I should add this line, I forgot to explain it, is because by default the selected ID, if we check our store, see by default this ID, which will be our selected ID, by default is null, and therefore, in a dashboard, when we are trying to find the currency with the ID null, we can't find it. So therefore this selected currency will be undefined. And here in a line chart, we are trying to read the name from an undefined, which which we are which will be caused an error. And but if we're checking here before we got to that line, if there is no selected currency, so we just return null. It will solve the problem. Okay, now let's get to the last section. Okay, first we can add a title. So the class name will be title, and we're gonna add a short tag with a text top assets. For this table, we're gonna create a new component. So let's create it. So inside the components folder, I'm gonna add a new file again and name it the currency table.js. So first here, I'm gonna, from the React, I'm gonna also import the use context. Then I'm gonna also import the currency list context, and I'm gonna import the selected currency context. Then inside the component, we're gonna get the currency list from, so we're gonna use the use context, we're gonna get it from currency list context. We're gonna also get the get history from selected currency context. So this component will return here, it will return a unordered list. Inside it, first I'm gonna add a class name here. So the class name will be currency table. Inside it, first I'm gonna add a header. So the header would be a list item with a class name header. Inside it, we will have 3 columns. So the first one will be name. The second one will be price. And this last one will be changes in a 24 hours. So now let's add the rows. For the rows, we're gonna take the currency list. We're gonna copy the slice, first 5 currencies. Then we're gonna go through those using the map, and for each currency, we want to return li. So here we can set it in a parenthesis. So list item here. Inside this list item, first the list item will have a key. The key will be currency ID. Then we're gonna also add a class name for it. We're gonna name it row. Then for on a click, so here in this table, you see when I'm clicking on this, the selected currency will be changed, and we're gonna see the history for the currency that we've clicked it here. So this is what this on a click will do, and it will be a simple function. There we're gonna call the, here we get history that we got from the selected currency context. So we're gonna just call it, and we want to get the history for the currency with this ID. Okay, so for the first column, you see that it was named. So for each column, we're gonna add a span here, and the text will be currency name dot name. The second column was price. For the price, first the dollar sign here, and then can use the math round currency dot price USD multiply by 100 and divide the result to 100. So this is was same as we did before. It will just round to the 2 decimal number. The last column, you see that was changes. For that we're gonna also add a span here. The span will have a style. For the style, so we're gonna we're gonna change the color, and the color will depend on a currency, then change percent 24 HR. So this name that you are seeing here is actually, if you go to the API, you see that we are getting it from the API here. So each of this has a change percent in a 24 hours. Okay, so the color will depend on this. So if it is a positive, then we want to set the color to, I'm gonna just copy the color here. It will be a red color, or it will be green here if it is positive. For the negative, it will be red. I just copy and paste it here. So, and the text inside this span will be, we're gonna use the math again, and the round, we're gonna round the currency dot change percent 24 hours multiply by 100 divide by 100. And that's it. And it will be percent. So I'm gonna just put the percent sign here. Okay, and now let's import it here in the dashboard and use it. So here we're gonna, after this div tag, we're gonna add it was a currency table. And I think that's it. So now let's look at it. So here we have the table. Now let's add the styling so it looks better. So for that we can go to the styles.sas. So here we can add it here inside this file, and we're gonna add the all styling for the dashboard and and the line chart and this currency table in the same file, which will be this styles.sas. Okay, so we can start by styling the dashboard. So this main tag, the sections inside this main, and also the intervals and intervals buttons. So I'm gonna just copy the styles for those elements. Then I'm gonna paste it after this min height. So you see here, I've set the flex basis to 70% for the main, which means that width of this main will be 70%. Then I've added some margin, and for each sections inside this main, you see I've changed the background color to the base color, and changed the border radius to 1 rem, and also added some padding and margin. For the intervals, you see that I've set the display to flex, and flex direction by default is row, so the buttons inside this intervals will be shown in a one row. Then added some margin here, and then I've added some gap between each buttons. For the buttons, I've added a padding here, and changed the border radius, and removed the border and outline. I also changed the background color to the secondary color, but 10% lighter. This is what this function lighten does. Then I've changed the color to the black, so this is the text color, and then I've added a box shadow and set the transition to 0.4 seconds. When I'm hovering over these buttons, you see that the box shadows getting a bit bigger, and also the background color is getting darker. So here we've changed the background color to the secondary color that is 10% lighter, but here we are just using the secondary color, which means it will be 10% darker. I've also added the active class here, the styling for active. You see that the background color and the box shadow is same as this hover, but I've also changed the color to the white. So the text color for the active button will be white. You can see it here in action. See, when I'm hovering over these buttons, you see the background color getting darker and the box shadow getting bigger. Also, when I'm clicking on it and this button is active, you see the text color will be white. Okay, so now let's add the styling for this search box, and you also see that the suggestions are in a same div, which will be the search box. So we're gonna add the styling for the suggestions as well. So I'm gonna copy the styling for search box here. Then I'm gonna paste it after this app. So here, see that I'm setting the width of search box to 100%, and I'm setting the position relative. Then I'm setting the so I'm changing the styling of input here, and I'm setting the width of the input to 100%, and adding some padding, changing font size, and also changing the background color. Here I'm removing the border and outline, and I'm changing the text color to the white, and also setting the border radius to the 5 pixel. For the suggestions box, you see that I'm setting the position to absolute, and I'm also setting the top, so the distance from the top to the 3 rem, and I'm setting the width to 100%, and I'm setting the list style to none. So by default, the list style is dots, and by setting it to none, we will remove those dots. And here I'm setting the background color to the same as the input, and then I'm changing the text color to the white, and remove the padding, and adding a small margin to the top, and also changing the border radius here, and I'm setting the overflow to hidden. For the list item. So for each items inside this suggestions box, we are adding padding to the top and the bottom and to the left and right. Then I'm changing the cursor to pointer, and when we are hovering over these items, you see that the background color will be this color. So let's check it now. I type. Okay, so it looks like something is wrong. If we go to the dashboard and the suggestions, okay, so it is because I forgot to add the class name to this list. If it is correct, I can check. It is just suggestion. Okay, so now you see that we have our suggestions here. You also see that the title here has no styling. So let's add the styling for this title. So I'm gonna copy the styling and I'm gonna paste it after this search box. And here we go. But here you see that we are missing the dollar signs. So let's add it as well. So it would be in a line chart and it would be for the title. And here is the price. So we can just add the dollar signs here. So okay, and okay, so this is not correct either. So for first day, you see that for the okay, so those options that I've added, those are not correct. So in a dashboard, can check here, hour, minute, 2 digits. Okay, so these are correct. And let's see here. So when it is 1D, the interval, so it will be hour, minute. And I don't know why it is not correct in this case. We go to the, so I'm gonna just pause the video here and check why we got that error, that bug. Okay, I found the reason why we got that error, and it is because when I was selecting this method from the VS Code suggestions, I didn't notice that I selected the wrong one. So this method should be actually to local string and not to data string. And by fixing that, you see that our bug is fixed as well, and we are getting the correct formatting. And by that, there is just one more thing left in this page, and it is a styling for this currency table. For that, I thought first we can put it in the same file, and by that I mean this is style.sas. But as you notice, this file starts getting bigger and bigger, and also that the currency table is a separate component. So we can instead create a separate SAS module here inside this style folder. The name can be same as the component, currency table. Then I can copy the styling for the currency table and paste it here. We also need to import it here in a styles.sas. Currency table. Now let's see if, okay, it didn't affect, so it means that something is wrong in our currency table. and you see that I've misspelled here. It should be currency table, and it looks like I misspelled too many in this project, but you see it is not difficult to find, especially when you are dividing the elements in a small components like this, so you know exactly in which component the bug or the error is happening, so it would be easy to find it. Okay, so now you see that it is working. Let me also explain this currency table SAS. So you see at the top we are changing the list item to none for this currency table, and we are setting the text color to white, and this one is actually extra, so we can just remove it, and this one is also extra, and remove it as well. So here you see we, for the header and row, we are changing the border radius to 12 pixel, and we have this, we setting the display to flex, and we are changing the padding, and we are setting a border. The reason you see that this border is invisible because the alpha part of this color is 0, so it make it invisible. The reason for it that we've added the invisible border is because, so if I remove it and show you, see when I'm hovering over these rows, you see it, they looks like they getting bigger when we hover over them, but when we are adding over it, so see now they looks better. So this is the reason why I've added this border. Then we have the cursor here, and there I've set it to pointer, and then for the each item inside each row and header we set the flex spaces, also it can be the width, so to 33.33%. so you see that each row has each row has 3 columns, and each of them will have a 33% as width. Then when here we are, when we are hovering over the rows and columns, rows and headers, you see that we are changing the border color here. And then for the header, you see that we are setting a background color, so it will be different from the other rows. And we are also changing the hover effect for the header. You see that we are setting it to the same as this one, so this means it will make it like we are not hovering over it, so we don't get this this color, border color, that we are getting in other rows. So this is what this line does, so it will remove that effect. Okay, by that, so I think the dashboard is completed. Now we can jump to the next page, which will be exchanges, and now let's create the exchange pages. So here I'm gonna first import some stuff. So we're gonna import use effect, use state, use ref, and use context from React. Then I'm gonna import the React paginate, and then I'm gonna import currency list context. Then inside the exchanges component, we're gonna create a variable, so exchanges. So we're gonna get the exchanges from use context. We're gonna get it from currency list context. So in this exchanges variable, now we have all the exchanges. Then this component will return a main tag with a class name main. Then we're gonna have a section here, and inside it we will have a div tag with the class name title, and inside it we will have a title. The title would be exchanges. So now, as you noticed, we've used the same main with the class name main and the section. So as we did in a dashboard, you see that we have a main and we have some sections. So this means that those styles that we apply to the dashboard will be applied to this component as well. So we don't need to create another SAS file for this component. Then if we go to the demo and we go to the exchanges pages, you see that in this page we have a table and then we have a pagination here. The pagination will be created by React Paginate, but the table we're gonna need to create a separate component for it. So let's start by creating a separate component for this table. We can, in a components folder, we can create a new file and name it exchanges table. So here I'm gonna create an empty component. Here in this component, we're gonna return a list with a class name currency table. Inside it, we will have an list item with a class name header. The headers will be rank, then name, and the value will be in 24 hours. Then the last one will be total, and it is in a percent. Okay, for the rows, first we're gonna get the rows as props, and here we're gonna go through the rows. We're gonna use the map function for each row. We're gonna return a list item. Class name for it will be row and row no over. So the first column was rank, so we're gonna create a span here, and the rank, for the rank we can get the rank by using here we got an error. It's because here I forgot the S. So, and we can get the rank by typing row dot rank. Then for next column it will be row dot name, and for the volume first it is in a dollar. Then we're gonna call a function here, prettify number, call it. Then we can pass the row dot volume, and here I misspelled volume USD. This in our table, if you look, you see that we are getting the volumes. We round the volumes, then we are adding BM, so B for billion and M for million, or K for the thousands. And by default, if we look at the exchanges, you see we are getting actually the actual number. So here what this prettify number will do is rounding the number and adding this B, M, or K. We don't have this prettify number function, but we're gonna create it in a second. Before that, we're gonna add the last column, and it will be the total. For that, we're gonna type math dot round, then row dot percent total volume, multiply by 100 and divide by 100. All right, so that's it. Now let's create this function, verify number. Can create it here at the top. Here we're gonna create it will take argument and it will be, and call it a number. So here we're gonna create a variable and call it a formatted number, and it will assign it to intl dot number format. So this intl stands for internationalization API, and with this method we can format this number to those million, billion, and to this type of formats. So for that, first we're gonna here, for the first argument that we're gonna pass to this method, we're gonna set the local, and it will be US. Then for the second argument, we're gonna pass the options. For the options, we want notations to compact. This is what, so this part will actually convert the number to this, will round the number and add this billion and the million. But we're gonna add another option as well, and it will be maximum fraction digits, and we're gonna set it to 1. The second one, so this one that we've added, will actually just add a 1 decimal number to the actual number, so it will round it to 1 decimal. Then to convert or to format this number that we've passed to this function, we're gonna type, so after this number format, after the parentheses, we type dot and then format. So this object will give us this method, and this method take the number and it will convert it and return it. Then the return value will be stored in this formatted number. Then we can just return it. And that's it actually. So this is our exchanges table. Now let's use it in a exchanges page. So to use it, we can after this title, we can type exchanges table. So we're gonna import it. Then for the rows, we're gonna just pass exchanges. But now let's add the pagination. So this page will be completed. The React paginate, I actually explained it in a separate video. So if you want to learn about it, you can just go and check that video. I'm gonna leave the link for that video in description. But so in this video, I'm not gonna explain it as deep as I did there. Okay, anyway, so let's create this React paginate. So we're gonna add it after this exchanges table. Here we're gonna add a bunch of props to this component. So the first one will be brick label. It will be 3 dots. The next label, I don't need a comma here. Next label, it will be this symbol. Then we have the on a page change, and for that we will create a separate function, and it is called handle page click. Then we will have another props, and it will be page range display. We're gonna set it to 2. Then page count will be same as page count, and this is a variable, but we didn't add it yet, but we're gonna add it in a second. Then the previous label, and the previous label will be this symbol. Then we have the render on a 0 page count. So we want to return anything if there is no item. Then container class name, we're gonna name it Pagination. Then active class name, it will be active. Then the page link class name, it will be page num. Previous class name, it will be also page num. Then the previous link class name, this one also will be page num. And the next class name, it will also be page num. And finally the last one, it will be next link class name, and it is also page num. So now we need to add some variables and some states. So the first one that we're gonna add here, we're gonna add a const here. So it will be items per page, and we want to show the 20 items in each page. Then inside the component, we want to add a state called current rows. Set current rows, and it will be user state, and by default is empty string. Then we have another state for page count, and set page count, and by default is 0. Then we have the rows offset, set rows offset, and by default is also 0. Okay, so now we're gonna use the use effect hook here. So here we're gonna create a variable, call it end offset, and we're gonna set it to rows offset plus items per page. So this end offset will be the index of the last item in the current page. Then we're gonna set the current rows to the exchanges. So exchanges here, then we're gonna use the slice, and we want to slice from rows offset. So this rows offset will be the index of the first item in the current page, and then we're gonna copy from this index to the end offset, also the last item in the current page. Then we want to set the page count, and we want to set it to exchanges length divided by items per page. So we also need to add some dependencies to this use effect. So we want to set the rows offset and items per page and exchanges as dependencies. Okay, so now let's create this handle page click. You can add it after this use effect. So here, when we click on a page number, we can get the new offset. So here we get the event. We can get the page number by typing event.selected. And we're gonna multiply it by items per page. So this event selected, this is something that is for this React paginate. So we can get the page number that we've clicked it by typing event.select, and then we're gonna multiply it by items per page. Then modulus, we want the modulus, and exchanges length. So and by this we can get the new offset. Then we can set the rows offset. So this new offset will be the index of the first item in the current page, and we can set this rows offset state, so we can change it to this new offset. And because this is updated with this use effect, and this use effect function that we've added here will be executed again, and we will get the new items in the current page. All right, so now let's check how it looks like. As you can see, we got all the exchanges here and not just the 21st one. So and it is because here I forgot to set the rows. So in an exchanges table, we need to change the rows to the current rows and not the old exchanges. And by that, now you see that we got the 21st one. And if I click on this button, you see the page is changing as well. Now let's add the styling for this pagination. For that, I'm gonna create a separate SAS module here. We can name it pagination.sas. Then I'm gonna copy the styling for it, paste it here. So you see here the pagination. There we've removed the list style and changed the display to flex, so we can get all the page numbers in one row. Here I've centered them and added a gap between them, and also changed the font size and added a margin top. Here I've changed the text color for all the items inside this pagination. Then for page num, you see that we've added the padding, and I've changed the border radius to 5 pixel and changed the cursor to pointer. For the hover effect, you see that I'm changing the background color, and for the active page numbers, you see that we have the same background color as the hover effect. So now let's see how it looks like. Okay, so it is, I forgot to add the pagination module here, add styles.sas. So here we need to import it. Pagination. So here we go, but you see that there is just a small bug here. So this is because here for the exchanges, I forgot to also change the page class name, and it should be also page num. And I think it will solve the problem. Okay, so this is working. There is just one more thing that I want to add to this table. You see, when I'm clicking on different pages, we are actually at what I want to do is, when I'm clicking on these pages, I want to go to the top of the table. So for that, we can add here this userref that I've added. Now it is time to use it. So we can first create a variable and name it the table ref, and then userref. Then on the section here, we can set the ref to the table ref, and when we are changing the page, we want to table ref, then the current, and then we want to scroll into view. So now let's see if it is working, and here we go. Awesome. So there is here we got just one warning here, and it is saying items per page is not a dependency, and actually it is correct, because this is a items per page is a constant, so it will never change, so we can just remove it. And now it is completed. Now let's just review everything. So here, and see if everything is working. So here we have our dashboard. We can search for Bitcoin, or we can search for another one. You see it is working. These buttons are working, and here we have these top assets. and there is something wrong here, and it is, you see the colors are not correct, and let's make sure it is correct as well. So here in a current table, you see that here the colors should be, so for when it is a positive, it should be this one. So we can cut it and paste it here, and for the negative should be the other one. So now it is correct. Okay, and in exchanges, you see here also there is something weird, and it is this hover effect, and actually we don't want this hover effect in this page. So this is because I've removed, if you remember, in our currency table we had a styling part named so I'm gonna just paste it here. We had this row no hover. You see we didn't use it in a currency table, but in a exchanges table, you see we, for the rows we've added this row no hover. So now you see we don't have that hover effect. There is just one more thing that is left in this page, and it is the percent signs for the total values. Let's add it as well. And here we go. Okay guys, so this will be the end of this video. I hope it was helpful and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you got any problem or if you had any questions, you can leave it in the comment section below. So I'm gonna try to answer them if I know the answer. So thank you for watching.